Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Soft Faith. This week we're going to be doing something a little different. It's going to be more of like an information session type of structure rather than a Bible study, because a very big season in the Christian calendar is coming up in about a week, and that is Lent. So, if you don't know what Lent is, we'll get into like a brief introduction of what is Lent. Next week I want to cover more of that in depth, but this week I want to focus more on fasting, just because fasting starts next week, and I think it's a pretty good idea to get a basis concept of what is fasting, and so you can start it once Lent starts. So, like I said, Lent is around the corner, and fasting is a very common practice that takes place during Lent. It's almost like a spiritual journey, and it's observed across many Christians, and it can also be seen as a preparation for salvation, for when Jesus died on the cross and rose from the dead. We're going to be going over what is Lent very briefly, like I said, and why we fast. Also, we're going to be going over different kinds of fasting across different branches of Christianity, and also how you can prepare for your fast this year. So, Lent, or sometimes called the Great Lent, is a season of prayer, repentance, and meditation, and means of preparing for the more known holiday, Easter. It's said to represent the 40 days that Jesus spent in the desert or the wilderness, where he was in constant prayer and fasting. And this story of the temptation of Jesus in the desert is it's a very big example in the Bible of what fasting is like. But if you want to go look at that, the full story is in Matthew's chapter 4. And basically he was in the desert to focus on prayer and meditation, but he's a big important part of the story is when he kept on getting tempted by Satan to not really break his fast, but he would get tempted by Satan to stop what he's doing and follow him instead and whatnot. So it's kind of like modeling that in a sense. And like I said, it's a big example of fasting being mentioned in the Bible as a means of meditation and focusing on God. So now that we have a brief overview of what Lent is, let's look at the core of our lesson, which is fasting. Fasting is practiced as a way to be distant from physical distractions and intentionally focus on one's relationship with God. Without constantly feeding those cravings, we feel more free and at peace, and also it allows for more focus. It also serves as a reminder of sacrifice and humility, echoing Christ's suffering and obedience. The term fasting is also used as a general idea of giving up something for Lent, or any other season. But more specifically, fasting is limited to the amount of food being eaten, while the other term abstinence is giving up meat. And we'll get into that more later. Also, I want to note something very, big. Fasting is not for the public, or it's not for you to compare to other people. Jesus told his disciples to fast in secret because it's you and God's relationship that is involved. So, now, how is fasting practiced? So, I've mentioned this in my intro episode, I think. I'm Catholic, and I'm more knowledgeable, of course, in my Catholic religion. But I've done research on other branches, so we'll look into those as well as like a brief, very intro, very shallow what they do. Uh, if you want to do your own research, look deeper into things, ask somebody that you know is of a different division, you're more than welcome to. This is just stuff that I've found off of other Christian websites and whatnot. So, Catholics. There's two kinds of Catholics. There's Roman Catholics, which is like the Western Catholics, and then there's Eastern Catholics. Now, Roman Catholics are more their fasting, well, Roman Catholics in general are more common here in the US, and their fasting style is more common here than the Eastern Catholics because like I said there's more Roman Catholics here than Eastern. Lent for the Roman Catholics starts on Ash Wednesday, which is let me double check, the 18th, and it ends on Holy Thursday, which is their overall fasting ends on Holy Thursday, but their last day of abstinence is Good Friday. And they practice the abstinence of meat every Friday. But their normal fasting, which is limiting their meals, is on Ash Wednesday and Good Friday. And now it specifies that their consumption is to one full meal and two small meals. But I feel like that's very uh vague, I guess, because everybody determines a meal differently, so it's kind of up in the air. So that's Roman Catholics. It's kind of more, they don't do as much strict fasting as you'll see in the other divisions. But what do I mean by strict fasting? Let's look at Eastern Catholics. Now, Eastern Catholics, their Lenten fasting starts Monday before Ash Wednesday, which they call, I believe, Clean Monday, and it ends after the Easter Mass. And their fasting days are every Wednesday and Friday. You eat less food, and they abstinence from meat, dairy, eggs all season. And some also do no oil or wine as well. Orthodoxy is kind of similar to the Eastern Catholics. Of course, if you look more deeper into it, they have their different restrictions. But Orthodoxy fasting and Lent start later. It depends on the calendars because the calendars don't line up sometimes, but for the most part, Orthodoxy Lent starts later than Catholic Lent and it ends later. Their fasting days are Wednesdays and Fridays, and they practice abstinence from meat, dairy, eggs, and fish, and most also do no oil or wine. Now, fish is allowed on certain days. I don't know the days exactly, but I know there's some exceptions to that rule, along with some other things I remember hearing. But again, that's something that you would want to look into or ask a Orthodox priest. Holy Week is also seen to be more strict than the Great Lent, which is after the 40 days, is considered Holy Week. It also, I've noted, I've seen a lot in some of these websites. They've noted that it should be done with the guidance of a priest. Some Eastern Catholics and Orthodox Christians observe a stricter fast on certain days during Lent or Holy Week, which can include abstaining from all food for 12 hours. So that's pretty common, you'll see that. Now, for the last one, I'm probably even less knowledgeable of, but from what I've found, again, not pulling it from nowhere, Protestants are well, I'll start with this. Some Protestants don't, I guess, fast or even participate in Lent as much. But for the ones that do, it's much more loose and it's not required, unlike the Orthodox and Catholic faith. There's also no set rules as well, depending on the denomination. It's more of a do whatever is comfortable for you. Common to see is also giving up something well valued like social media or caffeine. But some do, like I said, depending on the denomination, some do also commit to a strict fast and abstinence like the Catholics and the Orthodoxies. So, with that being said, you don't have to, you know, follow a certain set, you don't have to jump straight into following an Orthodoxy fast or a more strict Eastern Catholic fast for your first fast. I like to tell people for your first fast, start whenever you feel ready to. You don't have to start on Monday or Wednesday exactly. I only made this episode earlier just to give you a heads up of when Lent is starting. Also, if you realize you broke your fast by accident, it's okay. It happens even to seasoned fasters. Just pause, reflect, pray about it, and try again. But don't scrap the rest of your day or season just because of it. It's not a competition. It's also a way of learning about yourself more and why you fell into that temptation, and you get stronger by recognizing it next time. First time fasting also should be gentle, like giving up a snack or a specific food. Then you can start doing your research over the years of other fasts, or if you um commit to a certain religion of maybe like Catholic or Orthodox, you could start looking into their fasts and try to work your way up into a more uh I guess I don't want to say stricter fast, but I guess stricter fast. Another important thing to note, you must pair your fast with attending church, prayer, and reading the Bible. Fasting isn't the center of Lent, or else it would just be some sort of like glorified diet plan. And also, not everyone is capable of fasting. Children, pregnant people, or I guess women, people with medical conditions, and if you're a higher performing athlete, um, these groups of people should be kind of weary of how they're fasting. But there are still other ways of fasting, like giving up social media, performing better habits, and being more generous. Fasting is also meant to create clarity, not chaos. So you may feel little discomfort, which is basically your cravings drawing you back, but it should not lead to severe health issues like dizziness or fatigue or whatever. And that's kind of like when you know, like, okay, this isn't getting to the point that it needs to get to. Again, do not compare your fasts with other people. Everyone has a different intention and relationship with God. And I think that's so important because sometimes we get carried away with, like I said, it ends up being some sort of diet plan or whatever. But point is, don't compare your fasts. So, to conclude, as a reminder, fasting isn't about starving the body, but more about waking up the soul and blocking out the distractions standing between you and God. So, next week, we'll be talking more in depth about the season of Lent and why we celebrate Lent and all the good stuff about Lent. And even like going into the certain holy weekdays and whatever. And honestly, that could be even it's a whole different episode. But for the most part, I think these next few episodes are going to be more of like information sessions and educating you on what Lent is, because there'll be some quotes in the Bible that I'll reference maybe that can talk about Lent, especially like the Holy Weeks. Those are there's trust. There will be quotes on that. But sometimes like this fasting isn't very like there's no like set guidelines mentioned of how to fast in the Bible other than not fasting in public, which is what like Jesus was telling his disciples in I believe Mark. But yeah. So that's today. That's this week. Next week we'll be talking about Lent more like I stated. And yeah, have a lovely week guys. See you next week.